Welcome to WYCD Wicked. That stands for What You Can Do, and delighted to see y'all here. Pretty sure we've got that interview, son of a gun. Pretty sure has been downgraded to about 90%. That we've got that interview down the road with Fair Maps, Wisconsin. Man, oh man, what a Tuesday. We had all kinds of crazy stuff happening. The good news is, I have been reminded that Phil Defranko exists by Wireless Mike. Thank you very much for the recommendation. Gonna check in on him. He talks about the healthcare denial scam. I think that's going to be interesting to see. Same with a clip from Tom Hartman. Full disclosure, the Hartman clip has got the full What You Can Do treatment. The Phil Defranko, I kind of wanted to blind watch with y'all. In parts because I have no choice. I spent this entire day editing an interview, but also I haven't seen Phil Defranko in a long, long time. So I'm excited to catch up live with y'all here. And what do you say? Let's get right into it. But I should ask first, how's everybody doing? Oh, look at that. And we already got a hoppin' chat. Yeah, let's get started with the recording because we do that this way now. Give me a second. So thank you to Wireless Mike for this suggestion. This is Phil Defranko, and he's breaking down the healthcare denial scam. Now, as somebody who was formerly an employee of the local news industry, I know a whole lot about cheap health care. So I'm going to be curious myself to see this. Let's dive right into it. Let's see what's going on with Phil Defranko these days.
Imagine having your insurance claim denied in just 1.2 seconds. Your life, your future, decided in an instant. Well, welcome to Cigna's world, where an algorithm decides the fate of hundreds of thousands of claims, putting profits over people. And here's the thing, we already know insurance companies fuck us hard. But I promise you that by the end of this story, you're gonna want some healthcare to remove your foot from someone's ass. Right? And that's because ProPublica and the Capitol Forum investigated how one of the nation's largest insurers, Cigna, decides whether to approve or deny policy claims. Typically, the way that it's supposed to work is that claims go into the insurance system.
Hold up, another one from ProPublica. They've been featured, what is this, 3 times this week? That's some impressive reporting. ProPublica, well done.
Get screened by a nurse and then reviewed by a medical director. And that's because many state laws require doctors to review each individual claim before insurers reject them on medical grounds, which means examining patient records, going over coverage policies, and generally using their professional judgment. It's meant to be thorough and fair. And for small, low-cost claims, the company usually just pays them out because it's just not worth the time and money it takes to review them. But what if you didn't review the claims and just denied them anyway? Well, reportedly, that's exactly what Cigna's been doing for over a decade now, using an algorithm that automatically denies claims with a mismatch between the diagnosis and tests or treatments for the diagnosis that the company considers acceptable. Then the company's medical directors just sign off on all the denials in one big batch, deeming them all medically unnecessary, with one former doctor saying, "We literally click and submit. It takes all of 10 seconds to do 50 at a time." So in just 2 months last year, Cigna doctors rejected over 300,000 claims using this system and spending an average of just 1.2 seconds on each case. And this has squeezed fat stacks out of the company's policyholders, with Dr. Alan Mooney, the guy who created the system for Cigna, saying it undoubtedly saved the firm billions of dollars. And
Just in case you were wondering what their priorities are. That practice, apparently, the takeaway they have from it, saved the company billions. Great. That says so much about the American healthcare system. Number one, a company can exist while saving billions of dollars. What does that tell you about how much it's taking in? Could they have existed without doing that? There's no good answer. Either, yes, they could have, in which case, Jesus God, how much are we paying for an unnecessary part of the system? The health insurers don't do anything to make you healthier. Not a thing. They don't heal you. So they're existing in a system where an administrative change can save them billions. That's an inefficient system. Or they needed to do this to survive, in which case the only way they can survive is just by blanket denying claims. Other countries, and hey, link in the description, share this with people that need to hear it. Other countries, including people of Canada, America's fancy hat, they don't put up with this nonsense. And if the American voters would get together on this and pressure their representatives, regardless of what party they have subscribed to, pressure their representatives to give us free health care, we could just have free health care. And by the way, it's been measured to death by this point. We have near peers to compare ourselves to. Just about any other way to do this would be less expensive and more effective. Let me run that by you again. Almost any other country's healthcare system, if we're talking about near peers, almost any other country has better outcomes for less money. Both of those things are true. We did a whole damn stream about this, but in the top 11 countries in terms of wealth measured, the United States came in number 11. And the reason it was 11 and not 10 was just so we could include the United States on that map. Let's let Phil Defranko take her home.
Former executive saying, put yourself in the shoes of the insurer. Why not just deny them all and see which ones come back on appeal? From a cost perspective, it makes sense. And adding, insurers are very good at knowing when they can deny a claim, and patients will grumble, but will still write a check, which it turns out is very true. In one document, Cigna estimated that only 5% of people actually appeal a denial from the algorithm. And while that may sound low, and it is low, it's still relatively high for the industry. With one study finding that patients under the Affordable Care Act appeal less than 0.2% of the time, and insurers uphold about 60% of those denials. And then for those who do appeal, it's a fucking nightmare, as one guy who was insured under Cigna found out, telling reporters he was experiencing pain in his bones, so his doctor used a blood test to determine he was vitamin D deficient, with that costing $350. But when Cigna mailed him a letter refusing to cover it on grounds that it wasn't medically necessary, he couldn't believe it, saying this was a clinical decision being second-guessed by someone with no knowledge of me. So being a physician himself, he appeals the denial, and a second Cigna doctor reviewed the case but stood by the initial rejection, explaining that because the patient had not been previously diagnosed with a vitamin D deficiency, the test was unnecessary, which raises...
Again, to what I was saying earlier, I see that I'm a little quiet, I'll turn that up, huh? To what I was saying earlier, these people in the health insurance industry are not in the business of providing care. They're in the business of taking money from healthy people and expanding their profit by denying needed funds to sick people. In the United States of America, when you get a serious diagnosis, unlike almost every other country in the world that has the kind of money we have, unlike those countries, you're hit with two emotionally devastating realities. Number one, you have the diagnosis. That in and of itself is the kind of thing people need therapy to deal with a lot of the time. You also have bankruptcy. And at a minimum, you're being assigned a long, arduous dispute with a gigantic company. Does anybody really take the American healthcare system seriously? Does anybody really think that we don't have to change this? Come on. It's been measured already. We already know it's cheaper to have universal health care. It's cheaper. We already know it's more effective. We know the health outcomes are better. Unless you are a Saudi prince, wait times are generally shorter. The health outcomes are always, look at me, always better. And because we are not supporting multi-billion-dollar industries full of con artists, it's cheaper. I don't want to pay for that guy's effing Porsche. He's done nothing of value. Unless that's the guy who was the doctor that had the thing wrong with him. But the point is, I don't want to pay for the health insurance executive's Porsche because that guy doesn't do anything for society.
This is the obvious fucking question. How is he supposed to have a diagnosis before he got tested for the thing that he needed the diagnosis of? And so at that point, he's just baffled, and he takes us to an independent reviewer who, shocker, after looking at the case, said, hey, the test was in fact necessary. But this entire hassle took over 7 months over just a few $100s, and it may not have actually worked out in his favor at all if the patient himself wasn't a doctor. Now, in response to all this, Cigna argues that the system actually helps patients since it enables the company to fast-track payments for approved claims. One former executive
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm sure that's what they argued.
said that doesn't actually make sense, saying they were paying all these claims before, then they weren't. You're talking about a system built to deny claims. Plus, the list of treatments and tests that aren't covered for different diagnoses can be somewhat arbitrary. Right, in 2014, Cigna made a presentation weighing the pros and cons of adding another procedure to the list. Autonomic nervous system testing. It can help tell if a patient suffers from nerve damage caused by diabetes or a variety of autoimmune diseases. And it only costs a few $100s, which Cigna has been paying out for every single claim without question.
Look, he talks fast, so I'm just throwing these in here when I hear him. What's not being addressed right now is just take a few steps back from the woods from the trees for a second and have a look at the forest. How often do you insist upon treatment when you go to the doctor? How often are you like, no, doctor, tell you what we're going to do. I want you to run a full diagnostic test. You give me a CAT scan. I stubbed my toe. Give me a CAT scan. Open me up, see what's inside in the guts area. Really get in there, and then we'll bill the insurance company. That's nonsense. You go to your doctor. You tell them what the symptoms are. The doctor does tests that they deem necessary. And then, theoretically, your health insurance is supposed to pay for it. This blanket denial just assumes that a bunch of medically unnecessary things were done. Well, who's at fault there? Is it the patient? Nope. That would be, if there was fault, the doctor. But this is an insurance company daring to disagree with the doctor that spent, an hour with a patient? Talking to them about what's wrong, and they're just blanket denying, huh? This is a scam. It's a scam. Pure and simple. A way to know if we should nationalize something, a service, for example, is if every single person in the country has a reasonable expectation of needing it eventually. That is why it is the government's job, by and large, to take care of our roads, because we know we need pathways between places. And so we agree we will all contribute a little bit, and we will get the most efficient use of our dollars that way. We won't pay an executive. We won't pay a third party an infinite amount of money and give them control over our lives and our fates. We go to the government. Same thing with our military. Same thing with police. Same thing with firefighters. Doctors should be no different. This really is not a left or right issue. This is a dollars and cents issue. And if you firmly believe that U.S. healthcare is well set up, you're listening to people who are paid for by the health insurance industry. They're bought, plain and simple. Because the information exists, folks. Top 11 countries, top 11 richest countries, USA healthcare, number 11. Coming in last by a healthy margin. I'm going to let Phil Defranko go for a while now.
By adding the procedure to the list, it would deny almost 18,000 claims and save about $2.5 million per year, according to estimates. So sure enough, those greedy fucks threw it on the list. But also understand, this is a problem that goes way beyond just Cigna. Right? Health insurers deny millions of claims every year, be it for surgeries, visits to the ER, or life-saving treatments and prescriptions. Meanwhile, the 6 largest private health insurers in 2021 raked in more than $40 billion in profits. And insurance executives say systems akin to the algorithm used by Cigna have existed throughout the industry, with Mooney saying his group made a similar one for United Health so it could deny claims in bulk. And claim denials have become an even more pronounced issue for many people since the pandemic began. Because right now you have up to 4 million full-time workers out of the labor force due to long COVID. And for some, the care that they need to manage their chronic symptoms has forced them into medical debt, often because their claims are denied by insurance companies who are wary of paying for treatments that they don't know will work for an illness that's still poorly understood. And a paper last year actually estimated that long COVID could cost an individual $9,000 on average per year. But these types of denials aren't the only way that companies are squeezing you dry. With the New York Times investigation last year finding that major health insurers boost their profits by billions of dollars with the oldest trick in the fucking book: fraud. And at the center of this scheme is the Medicare Advantage program, a private sector alternative to traditional Medicare, where the federal government pays insurers for each patient who enrolls, with higher payments for sicker patients. Right? As of that time, it was on track to enroll more than half of all Medicare beneficiaries this year. So the companies devised every method they could imagine to make patients appear as sick as humanly possible on paper without providing any more actual treatment. This includes Kaiser gifting bottles of champagne or cash bonuses to doctors who found enough diagnoses and patient records. Or it could look like Anthem, now called Elevance Health, paying more to doctors who said that their patients were sicker. Or how about United Health, the country's largest insurer, telling its workers to mine old medical records for more illnesses, and when they couldn't find enough, just sending them back to try again. With shit like this, inflating the bills for 8 of the 10 biggest insurers in the program, plus 4 of the 5 biggest have faced federal lawsuits for fraud. So basically, Medicare Advantage was initially meant to reduce healthcare costs by privatizing the system, and instead, prices just shot past those of the government program that it displaced. Right? Instead of competing to provide the best care, insurers are competing to see who can better game the system. And the cost to the taxpayers is massive, with the additional diagnoses leading to $12 billion in overpayments in 2020 alone, according to one estimate. Or we're talking about an amount of money that's enough to...
Those inefficiencies are part of, not all of, but part of why this will be cheaper to just get rid of altogether. It is a early 1900s system we are using in the 21st century.
Cover hearing and vision care for every American over 65. But ultimately, I think where I'm going to end this story, 2 notes. 1, the more we talk in detail about stories like this, the more I think maybe Tyler Durden had some good ideas. And 2, if you or someone you know is one of the unlucky people who are getting letters denying them coverage, please appeal that bullshit. They are counting on you not. And in the meantime, if some fucking smart people can do something with all the emerging AI to make it just as easy for the people that are getting fucked by these companies to fight back with their appeals and making it easy for more and more people to do so, that would be amazing, because these rich, greedy fucks have just for so long been fucking around, and they deserve to find out. And then, have you ever looked at your outfit and thought, this ain't gonna cut it? Well, there's no better way to
Oh, that was so smooth. He got that in there real smooth. Good Lord. So, Wireless Mike says the second half of the video is also about healthcare issues if you want to cover it. Yeah. Yeah, I do. Sorry, I'm just looking at the chat there. Yeah, I absolutely do. Good work, Wicked Foxy Dragon. Thank you. I don't have to do the moderating now. I do want to talk about just the health insurance for a second, though, because boy, oh boy, that's the core issue. That industry should not exist. There should be no American health insurance industry. It's got to go. And everybody who's worried about the jobs those people would have, imagine for a moment that there was somebody employed to smash in your window every time you leave the house, and climb into your living room and cut up your couch with a box cutter. Just slice up all the cushions and then run away. And there's people, millions of people around the country employed to do that. Would we not get rid of that as a job? Would the argument that, wait a minute, if you make it illegal to smash in windows and cut up couches, so many couch cutters are going to lose their jobs. Well, it does more harm than good to keep those jobs. A health insurance company, and every single person that works in it is the couch cutter. We have to get rid of them. It's that simple. Vote in primaries. Go as far left as you can. This is one we're going to have to fight even the Democrats on. You're going to have to fight them. We're going to have to make it crystal clear. If you're Republican, guess what? You are not a slave to the party line. Contact your representative. Tell them, I want Medicare for all. Y'all did a great job of changing the tune of the Republican Party on Social Security. Do it again. Do it for health care. Give it to everybody. It is literally just Medicare for all that we're talking about. If you like it for people that are 65 plus, why the heck wouldn't you like it for everybody else? Give it some thought. I think it could be of use. Links in the description, of course. Let's check out the rest of that video, though, as long as we're here. Come on. Before we do, actually, let me set up the other video, just so that it's ready to go. I worked too hard. I worked too damn hard on this thing. Stand by for one moment. That's what I thought. Stand by. Neat. All right, let's watch the rest of that Phil Defranko. I do want to see what he's got to say. Huh?
Imagine having your...
Nope. All right. I believe. Here we go.
15 million Americans are on the brink of losing their healthcare, and you might actually be one of them. Yo, this is the largest health insurance disruption in a decade. And that 15 million number isn't just speculation, that is a real projection from the federal government, who also said this will disproportionately affect young Americans and people of color. Right? According to the Department of Health and Human Services, of the people who will lose their insurance, more than 1/3 are children, nearly 1 in every 3 are Latino, and 15% are Black. Well, like so many other protections that have been rolled back recently for the people that need them the most, this stems from the end of pandemic-era protections. Right before the pandemic, recipients of Medicaid, which provides health benefits to Americans with limited income, would have to renew their coverage every year. And if it was determined that they were no longer eligible because, for instance, they began to make more money, they would lose their coverage. But in March of 2020, Congress passed the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which prevented states from removing anyone from Medicaid during the public health emergency, even if they no longer qualified. And in exchange for states guaranteeing that they wouldn't take anyone off the program, the legislation also offered more federal funding to help pay for the increased enrollment. And as a result, Medicaid enrollment skyrocketed over the last few years, with coverage jumping from around 63 million people in February of 2020 to 85 million by the end of last year. We're talking about an increase of more than 30%. So an absolutely huge expansion in coverage, and as a result, the policy helped contribute to the rate of uninsured Americans reaching a record low last year. But back in December, Congress passed a federal spending bill that set an end date for the expanded Medicaid protections on March 31st. So now states have the next 12 months to verify who's still eligible and who's not, and 14 months total to complete the process of removing those people from Medicaid, a process that federal officials have dubbed Medicaid unwinding. And this is an absolutely massive undertaking. The scale is unprecedented.
So just to be crystal clear, once again, even though, of course, there's more Republicans on the side of evil here. Come on, you know what the party is these days. If you vote for him, you know what it is. But this is not just Republicans. This is Republicans and Democrats. This is everybody that takes corporate bribes. Here's a wild thing. You're more likely to have MAGA folks, if you're a lefty, on your side with this. Yeah. Reach out to voters of all stripes. Medicare for all. Done. Universal health care. Whatever system of the government paying the bill for this. Charge rich pricks because we don't need all these billionaires. They don't help us. They just hoard America's wealth. Charge them. Actually tax these punks. In exchange, never worry about a healthcare visit again. Never again. Can you imagine it? Make an earnest pitch to the right wing for this.
Federal and state health officials anticipating that this is going to be the biggest health insurance disruption since the Affordable Care Act came into existence over a decade ago. Meanwhile, all this is going down as many state Medicaid agencies are struggling with worker shortages, and any employees who started in the last 3 years have never gone through the process of conducting renewals. Beyond that, there are now 20 million more Americans who have enrolled in Medicaid since 2020 and have also never dealt with this process or had to pay attention to notices, which I mentioned because they're factors that could now cost them their coverage. And experts say that tracking down all the people on Medicaid will be an incredibly formidable project for states. I mean, just one of the factors, a ton of people have moved over the last 3 years and now they risk missing renewal letters. Stuff's gonna get sent to their old addresses, others may have changed their phone numbers or other contact info, making them harder to track down. With this resulting in what health policy experts call administrative churning, which is just when people who are eligible for Medicaid lose their coverage because of administrative issues like they got lost in the confusing bureaucratic renewal process or the state just couldn't contact them. And
Guess what? It's not an accident. Have you ever noticed that, Jesus, Phil. Have you ever noticed that a lot of government stuff's really hard to access? Like there's just mountains of complicated paperwork. Anytime it's your right to have something, but somebody doesn't want you to have access to that right, you can expect in the United States of America to be separated from your ability to access that right by a mountain of paperwork. It's not always a bad thing. Sometimes you want to make sure that somebody has the patience, the responsibility to fill out some paperwork. There's a written test for your driver's license. It's not entirely ridiculous. But you'll note it gets used most often to prevent people who aren't already wealthy from accessing something the government might have to pay for. There will come a time soon when we need to take steps to address that technique in particular. Believe it or not, one of the few things I will praise Barack Obama for. He's got gay marriage, good on him, and then the Fair Language Act. Basically, that bills have to be written in modern day English. We need to expand that, and we need to kill some of this bureaucracy because it's very much intentional. That up there, that's not an accident.
like they got lost in the confusing bureaucratic renewal process or the state just couldn't contact them. And unfortunately, the federal government is predicting that the administrative churning will be the reason that many people lose their coverage in this renewal process. In fact, according to HHS, of the 15 million people expected to lose their health care, 6.8 million, nearly 50%, will still be eligible for Medicaid. While those people can re-enroll, the whole situation is incredibly disruptive. Research has found that although 40% of people who lose Medicaid regain it within a year, a majority of the people who get
we just had an interesting comment, and I want to pause for a moment to address that comment. Not Big Mike, Downtime, who's planning on voting for Big Mike in 2024, says the government has nothing to give that it doesn't take. True. That's true. And the question then becomes, give to who and take from who? Or possibly whom. I don't know. I don't have a degree in English or anything relating to this, bizarrely. But the question becomes, who's the government giving to? Who's the government taking from? I suggest that the government, much like it does with the fire department, the police department, much like it does with all the military, much like it does with roads and a million other things, much like it does with schools, the government should give this to everyone, and it should take the resources to make healthcare from the richest among us. And the reason for that is because it would be healthy for the people, healthy for the economy. Yes, When you have the people who spend money in the economy not spending it all on medical insurance, which just ends up going to a rich person, you have a healthier economy. That money instead is going to go to a small business. Take from the rich, in this case, because they have way more than they need. We have given them, in fact, too much. In fact, we've weakened our country significantly because we keep giving handouts to the rich. Take from the rich, give health care to everyone, including the rich. That easy. You want it broken down into numbers? Look at it like this. The billionaires of America made $2 trillion during the pandemic. Let me say that again for you. When you were suffering during the pandemic, when we were all losing money and suffering during the pandemic, the billionaires made $2 trillion. We could have paid off, for student loans, it's $1.8 trillion. We could simply have no more student loan debt. Could be gone. We just taxed these monsters a little bit more. Instead, there's a great deal of effort put into the propaganda that makes some people view billionaires as royalty. They're not. They're just greedy. You want to know what you need to be a billionaire? You need nothing except the lack of a sense of morality. Because you don't become a billionaire without taking more from a system than you put into it. Because there's not enough hours in a day for somebody to have done anything that's worth what the billionaires get paid. They simply take advantage of our system. And they've been doing it for a long time. They've been doing it since the 70s. Quit letting them. Don't be that kid that gets his lunch money stolen by a bully and then gets embarrassed and defends the bully, covers up for the bully. Don't do that. Go get your lunch money back.
Cut off from coverage go without insurance for at least some period of time. And experts say that can be incredibly detrimental for people who have serious or chronic health conditions and could face serious issues if they have to go a month or even a week without insurance. Now, a notable thing here, the federal government has put some protections in place to try and ensure the unwinding process operates smoothly. For instance, states will be required to make a good faith effort to attempt to contact enrollees if a renewal notice is returned to the Medicaid office as undeliverable. States are also required to report data each month to HHS on how many people have been removed from Medicaid, and the department can technically step in if a state is not following federal requirements. But then there's also the matter of the other 8.2 million people who will be removed from Medicaid because they no longer qualify. HHS says that almost 1/3 of those folks will qualify for federally subsidized health insurance plans on the ACA marketplaces, and 60% of them will even qualify for free plans. But the department also unfortunately estimates that around 383,000 of those people who lose their coverage will fall into what's known as the coverage gap, right, in states that have not expanded Medicaid under the ACA. Because under Obamacare, Medicaid eligibility was expanded to include all adults whose income is up to 138% higher than the federal poverty level. 40 states opted into the expansion, but 10 refused, and those include Texas and Florida, two of the most populous states in the country. And because those states have set the income requirements so insanely low, they've created coverage gaps. Right? These places where you have people who are struggling financially, having incomes that are too high for Medicaid, but too low for subsidized Obamacare marketplace plans. In other words, these people just have no affordable healthcare options. So we're talking about massive, life-changing impacts on millions and millions of Americans. And the timeline that we're talking about here varies a lot state to state, with each state having its own schedule for how it's conducting Medicaid unwinding. 5 states, Arizona, Arkansas, Idaho, New Hampshire, and South Dakota, have already begun the process, with them moving immediately to kick people off Medicaid on April 1st, the first day they're allowed to. And then nearly all other states will begin removing people between May and July, and almost half of the states have started preliminary work for eligibility checks. In fact, some states began sending out renewal notices as early as February. Now, a key takeaway here is if you or someone you know are currently on Medicaid, experts say that there are a number of things that you can do to protect your coverage. First and foremost, make sure that your address and contact information are up to date with your state's Medicaid office, especially if you've changed them in the last few years. If you've moved recently or you haven't notified Medicaid about an address change, you should definitely check your previous address for filing forms. And while I know that it is easy to just assume a letter or an email from your insurance is just a statement about a claim or benefits, make sure that you're keeping an eye out for Medicaid application material. And same goes for calls and texts from unknown numbers. And if you do lose Medicaid coverage because you are no longer eligible based on income or other factors, know that you could still be eligible for other healthcare programs, including free or cheap plans through the Obamacare marketplace at healthcare.gov, with HHS even setting up a special enrollment period so you can transition to a marketplace plan if you lose Medicaid from March 31st 1st, 2023 through July 31st, 2024. And that window will be open for the majority of states, 33 to be exact, that use healthcare.gov as their insurance marketplace. And some of the 17 states that manage their own marketplaces are also allowed to offer the special enrollment period, though notably, they are not required to. So I'll say it, I'll also link it, healthcare.gov, where I'm going to include a link where you can find what marketplace your state uses and links to apply. I'll also be linking down below a really helpful tracker where you can look at each state's unwinding plans and other relevant information. But ultimately, that's where I'm going to end this. This is one of those stories I think it's important that people are just aware of it in general, but also if you're one of the 15 million people that are affected, you need to know this. I'm trying to look out for you because the people in fucking charge do not. At least, not universally, or oftentimes in general. But on that happy note, my name's Philip Defranko. You've just been filled in. I love yo faces, and I'll see you.
I mean, I'm learning a lot about presentation from Phil Defranko. Kept it moving. I like that a lot. Great suggestion, Wireless Mike 73. Thank you. No additional notes. The man even provided links. I mean, I'm going to go steal some of his links and share that message. The man put in the work. I'm a Phil Defranko fan now. Well done. That is just about the neatest thing. I remember the days when Phil Defranko was a like a goofy YouTuber, like comedy only. Delighted to see that he's, at least in this subject, really, in my opinion, struck quite a blow for the good guys. I think that's valuable information to have, plain and simple. Let's have a look at what the Wicked community thinks. Patrick Kibidote says, if GE paid the same tax rate that I do, we could end hunger tomorrow. The same goes for a whole heap of multinational corporations. Yeah. Wireless Mike says, thanks for sharing. Well, my pleasure. And thank you for the suggestion. Mars Falcon. Oh, no. Mars Falcon says, the reason Americans have jobs is because taxes built an infrastructure conducive to business. Acting like jobs outside of Warlord Bodyguard or King's Gopher wouldn't exist in the libertarian world, or would exist in libertarian world is asinine. Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm somebody who, when I was a teenager, the ideals of the American view of libertarianism really spoke to me. I was like, yeah, go out in the woods, start your own thing, live off the land, not rely on anyone. Have you ever tried to build a lawnmower? The level of sophistication that we rely on to survive simply doesn't happen in isolation anymore. Is it possible to go strike out on your own and make it? Sure. But you're going to go back to living like our ancestors did, which is to say a short and painful life. And if you want to be serious, genuinely serious about accomplishing things, I mean as a person as well as a species, then you have to deal with the real world. And in the real world, we have specialists. And because of that, we've got somebody that knows how to make concrete. We've got somebody that knows how to make steel. We've got somebody that knows how to turn that concrete into a road. We've got a bunch of people that know how to turn that steel into cars and lawnmowers and forks and everything else. In that world, we have to work together. Otherwise, the guy that makes concrete is eating soup with chopsticks. And the guy that makes cars doesn't have anything to drive them on. Or you can spend your entire life learning how to do that stuff, and when you're 105, start living. It's no way to conduct ourselves. Theoretically, I've got a clip from Tom Hartman. There we go. What do you say we record this thing? One of these times, I did it already. I'm going to forget to just record it at all, and I'm going to have to wait 10 hours for it to process on YouTube. Ugh. All right, let's try this out. Got a viewer suggestion here from Franny P. Thank you very much, by the way. We got some more Tom Hartman. He's amongst my favorite political commentators. I'm going to throw this at you. In my opinion, Sam Cedar's the GOAT. But if Cedar's not on, Hartman's a close second because some of his work's fantastic. Let's have a look at Tom Hartman reflecting on his travels to Germany in the 80s and his talk with former Nazis, because he has some opinions about how America's shaping up these days that I think is probably good for us to have a serious look at.
Past the hour, and when I was living in Germany back in the 80s, I had I mentioned this yesterday, I knew a number of people who were Nazis or who were ex-Nazis, who had been Nazis. I knew one guy who still was a Nazi, but everybody else I knew was a repentant ex-Nazi.
I did not realize he hung out with Trump in Germany in the 80s.
And one of the things that I learned was that in the 1930s, this was something Hitler put into place in 1934 or 35. The radio stations and the newspapers had special sections. The stations had special times of the day, and the newspapers had special sections in the paper where you could call up or you could write a letter to the editor to denounce your neighbors, to say that they were not patriotic Germans, and name them and give their addresses. Now, this was a fairly common occurrence. And then those people who were named would then be harassed by their neighbors. They'd be harassed by the police. Depending on what was being claimed, they could even be arrested. And, later it became, oh, this person's a secret Jew, or this person's really, they pretend to be a patriotic German, but they're really a trade unionist or a socialist or whatever.
Just to be real clear. So he's saying it started with bullying. Just kind of being an asshole, trying to get the other side, trying to rile them up, trying to make their lives harder, trying to harass. That is how the Nazis got started. If you find that everybody outside of your group treats your group like it's bad, it doesn't necessarily mean you're in a bad group. It doesn't. But you should consider it. If you've never considered whether you're the bad guy, start right now. I've done tons of bad things. I'm sure I've been the bad guy in somebody's story for an extended period. And if that ever happened, I'm sorry. But I can hold my head high because I've genuinely tried to be a decent person. So have most people. Part of that equation is not putting your head down and charging ahead with what you consider to be the right course of action at all times. It is, in fact, to periodically stop and ask yourself if you are playing for the right team. Give it some thought. Let's let Tom Hartman bring her home.
So, this idea of turning in your neighbors has a long and deep history in fascist states. I say that as a predicate to what is happening in Missouri right now. The governor, the Attorney General of Missouri has launched a new anti-trans campaign. There is a form from the Attorney General's office, Andrew Bailey, the Missouri Attorney General, and it's home/file a complaint/transgender care concerns. And the form is called the Transgender Center Concerns Form. And you fill it out. You complete this form to submit a complaint or concern about gender transition intervention you have experienced or observed in Missouri. The Attorney General is not a private attorney, but enforces the laws of the state of Missouri as written. By submitting this form, you agree that you may be contacted by the Attorney General's office about the facts stated in this complaint or concern. Please complete this form in as much detail as possible. And then, the form has all the spaces for, all the details, right? And you don't even have to be a citizen of Missouri. There's a place in there where you can fill in what state you're from. So anybody in the United States can start turning in people who live in Missouri for being trans or for dressing up as women. How long before it really goes ugly? Frankly, I don't think very long.
Wouldn't it be interesting? Wouldn't it be interesting if some mischievous internet hoodlum would have put the link to the Missouri Attorney General in the description? Wouldn't it be fun if tomorrow morning Missouri Attorney General cracks open their emails and has a look at their little trans hate list, and instead of getting a bunch of Americans reporting on other Americans who they suspect are trans, instead of that, they have an inbox full of messages calling them a see you next Tuesday for being a bigot. Well, just such a link happens to be in the description of this video. If you got nothing else going on tonight, now's a great time to send the Missouri Attorney General a little note telling that person what you think of them and telling them what you think of this anti-trans bigotry. Hell, you can send them a link to this stream. You can send him a link to the Tom Hartman program. That's only 3 minutes. He's got to watch that. But regardless, flood that inbox, would be my recommendation, with some facts, like you can't stand this person if that's the case, or you will never, ever support them in a national campaign if they ever choose to run for anything. Let them know that they're seen and that, son of a gun, you found the culprit. It's you, Missouri Attorney General. You're the one that needs reporting. Just make their day worse, because they earned it. And if you've got friends who are starting to go down the right-wing rabbit hole, I definitely recommend that clip from Tom Hartman. Show them that. No one is going to be able to say it better than Tom Hartman just did. He literally talked to people who were Nazis, who pointed out what the playbook looks like. It looks like this. And finally, to make sure we don't have Nazis in the future, check your local school board. Keep up with them and make sure they're not removing books. Remember, Republicans need dummies to vote for them. They require idiots to fall for grifts. They require ignorance. So it should be our top priority to make sure they don't get away with making our children ignorant. That's where Republicans come from. Ooh. Tell you what, I'm not sure if you guys are still seeing. Oh, that's because this is top chat. I'm gonna pull a rare move here. Patrick's time. I have now hidden your messages. Just getting annoying. I have something that I would love for y'all to see. I recently had the pleasure of talking with the grassroots organizer for Fair Maps, Wisconsin. And theoretically, I will pull it up. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I spoke with this person earlier today. It was a fun conversation, and if you watch it, you'll find that I spend the first half of it unable to hear good news. So I'll tell you right here, most of the work's been done. You can thank those in Wisconsin who put Janet Protasiewicz on the Supreme Court in that state. Great job. There are things we can do to help the process along, certainly. But this is one of those rare moments where the victory has been had. So enjoy it. Here is the grassroots organizer for Fair Maps, Wisconsin.
Carlene Beshen. I am the organizing director, the grassroots organizing director for the Wisconsin Fair Maps Coalition. So I follow the lead of the grass tops organizations that are part of our coalition to guide the work of grassroots activists. That's what I do.
What is Fair Maps Wisconsin trying to accomplish?
Our long-term goal is to have a legislative fix to our very partisan problem. And a lot of people are confused by that because they say, isn't the legislature the problem? And the legislature is the problem when the legislature draws our maps. But the legislature also has to be the group, the body that creates and passes legislation to create a nonpartisan process for creating voting district maps. And so that's what we want in the long run. There are folks who would like to see that happen through a constitutional amendment. There are folks who'd like to see that happen through legislation that creates something similar to the Iowa model, but adapted for Wisconsin's difference in demographics and other kinds of things. But that's what we'd like to see long term, a nonpartisan process for creating legislative voting districts.
So that would be like an independent, are you saying like an independent commission that would draw the maps?
So, there are a lot of different models that have been successful. The longest term and the one that we have talked about the most here in Wisconsin is the Iowa model, which was put into place in Iowa back in the 80s by Republicans. And it uses civil servants, much like in Wisconsin, our Legislative Reference Bureau, to hold hearings, to hear from folks all around the state, and to create legislative maps that they then present to the state legislature for passage and then are signed into law by their governor. Our Constitution in Wisconsin reads much the same, except we don't have a model, right? We don't have a nonpartisan body that does that interviewing. As a matter of fact, we don't have anybody that does that interviewing legally. And so what has happened here historically is 1971 was the last time that there was any kind of bipartisan cooperation in Wisconsin to create legislative maps. In 81, 91, 2001, there was disagreement, bickering. The different chambers of the state legislature were held by different parties, or the governor was different. The maps didn't pass. And federal judges created the maps for the state of Wisconsin in those three census cycles and the redistricting that comes after that. In 2011, Republicans held the trifecta. They had the governorship, the state assembly, and the state senate, and they created the maps. And they created maps that were very gerrymandered. But I cannot let Democrats off the hook here, because in 2009, they had the opportunity to pass nonpartisan redistricting legislation. It had been proposed. They looked at the 2008 maps from Wisconsin, which were very blue. Obama won here very big. And they thought they would be the ones to draw the maps. And they did not want to give up that, opportunity for drawing the maps the way they wanted to draw them.
Yep.
And so the maps were gerrymandered initially in 2011, and then even more gerrymandered in 2021.
It seems like the apple in the Garden of Eden, where every time a political party's in control, they want to take a bite of that gerrymandering apple, but it leads to no good.
So the three states that have sort of the best citizen commission are Michigan, which is new for you,
Yes.
Colorado, and California. So they have an independent citizen commission, and that is they're not political appointees. They have a process by which they are chosen, etc. And they've had the most success in creating maps that reflect the electorate. And Iowa has a system, going back to them, because that's the kind of what we've talked about here most often in Wisconsin. They've created maps that civil servant agency has created maps back to the 80s. So 80, 90, 81, 91, 2001, 2011, 2021 that have never been taken to court. They get, they create, the state legislature can reject the maps and they can modify them some. So in this last time, for instance, the state legislature rejected them twice. If they reject them a third time, then the legislature takes it on to create them. But the third time, they pass them. That has happened with Republican majorities in their state legislature and a Republican governor. It's happened with Democratic majorities. It is not foolproof. I mean, certainly there are problems with anything, but they don't have gerrymandered maps. And what can I say? They don't. So that's what we would like to have here in Wisconsin, a situation where our representatives are representative of the electorate.
So just to be crystal clear, when you're talking about who draws the maps, you're talking about an independent commission, correct?
A nonpartisan commission or a nonpartisan body that would do that. So in other words, not political appointees.
Okay.
Whether it's an independent citizen commission or a civil servant agency, like for us in Wisconsin, the Legislative Reference Bureau, not political appointees. So in other words, not 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, 3 independents, not that.
Interesting.
Because then they come at it from their political space, and
I see.
They're not really thinking about the electorate. They're thinking about their party position, and
so
that's like off the table.
You run the risk then, if you've got 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, and a deciding vote, you run the risk of there always being 3 votes for what the Republicans want to do, 3 votes for what the Democrats want to do, and then it's really just decided by the rando.
Right.
Okay.
And I would venture to say it's not a risk. It's probably a good chance. I mean, if I had to lay money on it, if I was a betting person, which I'm not, but if I was, I would say, yeah, that's exactly what would happen.
So what is a nonpartisan commission? Like how do you find somebody and say this person is nonpartisan? They don't have an alignment.
Civil servants who are hired for their expertise and serve in like in our Legislative Reference Bureau, those people work in a nonpartisan way all the time because they're working for the state, and like they in particular do a lot of work for the state legislature, and they do a lot of work for both sides of the aisle, and they have to bring it, they're trusted body by both sides of the aisle because they're asked to do research on something. They do the research, they bring back what they found. In the case of independent citizen commissions, our People's Maps Commission might be a good example of that. It was there's a long story behind it, but the short story in how the commissioners were chosen is they applied. They were, random people, not random. They were interested people who applied, and their applications were vetted by retired circuit court judges, and found, those judges had their short lists. Actually, I don't know this. I didn't talk to them. I'm assuming this. This is totally assumption on my part.
Fair enough.
They vetted those applications. They came to the meeting with their other judge colleagues and went through the applications. They were charged with choosing a commissioner from each of our federal congressional districts. So there were 8. We have 8, and then they chose one more. So it would be a 9-person body in case they determined that they were going to make decisions by voting, that it would be an odd number. And then those people were interviewed and became the commissioners.
How can somebody within the state of Wisconsin fix the gerrymandering problem? What is something a resident of Wisconsin can do? Right
now, we have maps in place that were imposed on us by our state Supreme Court in April of 2022. Those maps were used for the last election in November 2022, or the last November election. We have just had a Supreme Court election where Justice Janet Protasiewicz was elected. So she's Justice-elect now. She was a circuit court judge in Milwaukee. And she has expressed an openness to hearing a case about the maps. Now, can regular folks do a whole lot about a Supreme Court case, or whatever's happening as it relates to litigation there? I think becoming informed is a really important thing. But the other thing that's happening right now, which is a consequence of our gerrymandered maps that's really important for people to be involved in, is the biennial budget process. So the Joint Committee on Finance is holding hearings. There's one more next week, and they're also accepting written testimony about what people want to see in the budget. And the reason why this is important is, just like the federal committees at the state level are made up of a balance that reflects the electeds in the state legislature. So our Joint Finance Committee is very skewed toward Republicans. And I don't want you to get the sense that I think Republicans are bad. I don't. I think Republicans and Democrats need to learn to collaborate, and that's the piece that I think that nonpartisan maps would have. So this actually brings up in our budget process many of the issues that Wisconsinites across the political spectrum agree on, like fully funding public schools, like shared revenue for municipalities and counties. I happen to be on the village board in my municipality, and I'm getting calls all the time about how much we're spending. And I'm like, well, if we have more revenue back from the state, it would be a little different. Mental health issues, all kinds of things that people across the political spectrum agree on. Doing something about PFAS and water, on and on and on. So it's about connecting the dots between what's not happening in our state legislature and gerrymandered maps, or the kinds of legislation that is being proposed in our state legislature and gerrymandered maps. So we have general agreement on Medicaid expansion. We're one of 10 states that has not expanded Medicaid, even though We have like 82% of the population thinks that's a good thing. We have not implemented universal background checks on gun purchases, even though there is better than 82% agreement on that, even among gun owners. So there are lots of things that are being addressed and not addressed by our state legislature in the budget and in other places. And so the budget right now is a big place where people can advocate for the things that they think should be in the budget and then link them to the reason why they're not happening, because they haven't happened now since 2011, to these gerrymandered maps.
So when you're saying link them or advocate for them, what is it that an individual Wisconsinite can actually do? Are you saying write your representative, write your district representative? Are you saying...
Great question. I'm saying submit testimony to the Joint Finance Committee. There's a way to do that, and I can send you all these links. Submit written testimony to the Joint Finance Committee. Send that testimony also to your own representative, and also send it to your local newspaper. Say, I sent this to the Joint Finance Committee, right? And this is what I think our community needs, or especially if you're like me and elected, this is what I sent. You talk to me all the time about these things. I'm advocating for us at the state legislative level, and I would hope that they would respond. I'm going to tell you that I don't think they will, because the maps are gerrymandered and they don't have to pay attention to me. So again and again, bringing it back to, we would have more functional, productive state government if our maps were not so gerrymandered. We would not be standing in front of this dais of folks who are not really paying attention to us, because, no kidding, they're on their phones like this, and not getting what we want if the maps were not so gerrymandered.
How much of an effect would contacting your representative have? For example, like what is the thing that would be accomplished? Do we need somebody to start a suit? Do we need a new court case made? Is an existing court case going to be brought in front of the Wisconsin Supreme Court? How can we take advantage of this change?
There has been an indication by the law firm Law Forward that they plan to bring litigation after August. So I think, I'm not a lawyer, and I can't speculate, because that's exactly what it would be, speculation about what will be involved in that lawsuit. It will be brought in state court rather than federal court, since the Supreme Court has made, the U.S. Supreme Court has made it clear that they're not interested. And ironically, my home state is North Carolina, and the Rucho versus Common Cause case that sort of slammed the door on the U.S. Supreme Court doing anything about partisan gerrymandering came from North Carolina. So I'm just like, okay,
that hurts.
Help me with this. It hurts. It's like a gut punch. I do think that there will be litigation. As a matter of fact, I'm certain there will be litigation, and that it will be in state court. Now, whether they start in a lower court and work their way up for discovery, whether they go directly to the Supreme Court, I don't know. I really don't know. But I strongly suspect that whatever they do is going to be based on things that will keep them out of federal court. That's kind of a no-brainer, given where me as a layperson can see that.
What do you think the odds are that the districts are redrawn by 2024? And is there anything anybody can do to speed up that process?
Well, there are a lot of maps that were drawn, lots and lots of different maps that were drawn going into this process. Now, the way we got these maps, and it's worth saying, is that when our state Supreme Court determined that they would be the court of original jurisdiction, they did a little bit of questioning of the potential plaintiffs in the case. And what was, should we use a loose change approach? Should we consider partisan lean? Should we be proportional? Blah, 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 blah. They ultimately decided to use a least change approach. Now, that meant a least change to the already very gerrymandered maps.
Yeah.
So any proportional maps that we had created, and believe me, we had created a lot because I worked a lot with the People's Maps Commission and voters to create maps. I mean, we submitted hundreds of maps, almost 1,000 community of interest maps to the People's Maps Commission. When that least change approach decision was made, that meant we just had to throw all of those out.
Oof.
Including the governor having to throw his out and come up with something that was the least change from those very gerrymandered 2011 maps. Now we have even more gerrymandered maps from 2021. So, we don't want to change those maps. We don't want to do a tweak here and there to I should say, I don't want to do that. And the people who are engaged in this movement don't want to just tweak those maps because they're terrible. We want them gone and we want to start over. And there's a lot of places to start from that we had back in October of 2021 that could be potentially used. Now, will they use any of those? Will they propose any of those? I have no idea, but they do exist already.
So what are the odds that they're going to be implemented? That fair drawn districts, in other words, are going to be implemented by the next election?
So I am the eternal optimist. Absolutely, the eternal optimist. My father taught me to live in hope. Right.
Okay.
So my hope and my best case eternal optimist says they hear the case in August. They do all of their finding, they being the Wisconsin Supreme Court, they do all their finding, and they determine, yes, that these maps are unconstitutional and that we need different maps, and they either pick one of those that was already created back in October 2021, or they hire somebody to use all of this sophisticated, accessible software to create new maps, and they have them in place by April of 2024. They did that October 2021 to April 2022. That happened already. It's not that it can't happen. That timeline is a doable timeline.
Okay.
And then we have new maps for our 2024 election. And again, I want to go back to, this is coming from a nonpartisan place, okay?
Yeah.
Because maps, no matter how they're drawn in this state, are going to favor Republicans. I do not begrudge Republican seats. Admittedly, I vote as a Democrat, and anybody who looks at my personal Facebook page will see that. But that said, I don't appreciate it when people win by cheating.
Yeah.
And gerrymandering is cheating. Bottom line, it's cheating. It's skewing things so that you can't lose. And we know, that Vegas dealers do that. And, there are people who've been, ousted from sports halls of fame for throwing games so that they would win and they would have power, or they would have money or whatever. It's cheating, period. End of story. So new maps for 2024 would probably still have a Republican advantage in our state legislature. It would probably be more like this than this.
Yeah.
And that's important, because if you're like this, you got to talk to those people. If you're like this,
you don't have to negotiate. You don't have to legislate for. Yeah.
And who loses? We do. The residents of the state, we lose.
Absolutely. Well, what can people outside of Wisconsin do to help people in Wisconsin get fair maps?
That's a really good question. Continue to support the people who live here, assuming you know some people who live here. I think there's also ways to donate. My fiscal sponsor is the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign. I am guided by the lead team of our coalition, which includes the League of Women Voters and Common Cause and the Farmers Union and All Voting is Local. Lots of pro-democracy or nonprofit, nonpartisan organizations meet on a regular basis to guide the work that I do with the grassroots. But my fiscal sponsor, so the people who collect money to pay for that work, is the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign. But there are also other organizations that are doing this work. The League does, Common Cause does. Law Forward is the law firm that it plans to bring the litigation, and that's pretty much out there in the media. You know, they said so right after the election. So that's another place if you're so inclined. You know, as not being a voter or a resident of the state, there are not a whole lot of ways right now to be supportive other than to donate and be informed. I think being informed is a really important piece that we often overlook, and is what I, as a grassroots organizer, help activists do with resources and things for educating voters through social media, through letters to the editors, I was saying before, through postcard writing and that kind of thing.
Well, it sounds like donating for sure, and also taking the time if they've got family in Wisconsin to reach out and inform them if their family
Absolutely.
isn't particularly informed. Would you say it's accurate? This is an accurate thing I've got, that the processes are underway to redraw the maps in a more fair manner.
Yes.
Okay.
I would say that the litigation is a very real next step. It's going to happen, you know, and as I said, I'm the eternal optimist. I'm very hopeful that it will be effective. But that's a short-term fix, right? That just fixes it for this cycle. And I think that we can expect that there will be more litigation. I think there'll be, probably appeals and other attempts to thwart a decision. So our best bet is a long-term fix of getting legislation passed. And I don't foresee that happening until we have a more balanced legislature.
It's a bit of a chicken and egg situation because without fair maps, you're not going to get a balanced legislature. But without a balanced legislature, you're not going to get a process for fair maps put in place. So it sounds like this upcoming fix is so crucial because it increases the odds that in the next election, you'll get a fair legislature, which will allow people to draw fair maps or to change the process by which the maps are drawn.
That is correct. So
it sounds like 24 is important.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Well, this litigation is really important, and 24, assuming we have better maps, will be really important. Or whenever we get them, I am convinced that we will get them. We cannot be ignored forever.
Yeah.
It just can't happen. And, you know, I think if you're keeping up with the national media at all, which I'm sure you are, you know, there's a lot out there that says Republicans are waking up, and there are a lot of moderate Republicans who have been engaged in this as well. There were Republicans who were part of the People's Maps Commission that really want to see something that is fair and reflective of the electorate. So this is not about getting a Democratic map.
Yeah. It's about a fair fight.
That's right.
To a representative, to your knowledge, would like 5 phone calls and emails be something they'd be impressed by? Would 10 be something? Yeah. All right.
5 to 10. And I think encouraging people that you know to do the same, because then it grows exponentially, right? I mean, if I do 5 and you do 5 and we each reach out to 2 of our friends and ask them to do 5, you know, that's already we've I could probably figure out that math equation, but we've already made a bigger impact than just our own 5.
Beautiful.
Because we've asked people that we know. I want to just throw out our website.
Please
it's,
do.
fairmapswi.com. fairmapswi.com. There's a place there to sign up to get our weekly update, to take action, to sign the petition, to, all kinds of resources there. And the weekly update comes out every week. Actually, beginning in May, it's going to come out every other week because we're kind of in a little bit of a slow period now for direct action that people can take. And if you are in Wisconsin, I can't say enough how important it is to help connect the dots for people. Because if folks live in a very red area, and no matter how the maps are drawn, they're going to elect a Republican, or if they live in a very blue area and they're always going to elect a Democrat, that's a lot of times I say, well, this doesn't really impact me because no matter what, the person I'm voting for is being elected. And they're not connecting it to the legislation that either is passed and vetoed by the governor or is not passed, or even there are a lot of bills that never even get a committee hearing. And people say, the legislature is broken, and they're right. They're absolutely right. And so, connecting those things so that people understand nothing's getting done because the maps are so gerrymandered.
Just some closing thoughts on the rough cut there. Less of this, I think. I think less of this on screen. Otherwise, I deeply enjoyed talking with a genuine grassroots organizer. One thing she said early on that I really want to underline, I can't believe I haven't been saying it more. My God. When you're contacting your representative, a massive way you can increase the effectiveness that you have, that one email you sent had, is to tell a local news organization that you just did that. Anytime you're contacting someone in government and telling them that you want them to do a thing, that's a potential news story. Will the news pick it up every single time? No. But if they pick it up once, you're going to go from an audience of 1 to an audience of tens of thousands. That is a great way to increase the pressure you are putting on your employees, which are your representatives. I'll just click off that. Let's see what the wicked community has to say. The anti-corporatist says, I'm going to have to back up and watch the part I missed. I already had heard the thing about Cigna mass denying claims, but I hadn't heard it from Defranko. He pops in and out of my feed. I don't know. I don't know why. I was surprised that Defranko took that on. It was a pleasant one, though. My word. Yeah, we had our resident troll. On that note, let's try out a technique the next time we get a right-wing psycho in here. Nobody deny the things they're saying. It's a fun game I like to play with right-wingers. It's a training exercise. And you can get them to destroy their own arguments. And here's how you do it. Instead of saying, that's not true, you just ask, where'd you hear that? Where's that information coming from? Well, that's... Trans people are murdering children. Well, I'm concerned about that. I don't want that to happen. Show me where you heard that. And when you inevitably are taken to freedomeagle.net or gun freedom for all time, whatever. I don't know why it's always a Southern guy that I'm making the butt of jokes here. Let's make him from New England. I can't do that accent. Fine, he's Irish. Gun freedom for all time. When you are inevitably taken to that website, point out how ridiculous it is and ask if they have a real source. It's a fun way to get them to do the work for you that they should have done themselves. Anyway, it's a hell of a lot of fun. But I have to say, I've seen y'all. I've seen y'all give them the business, and if it was on a debate stage, there would be no question at all about who won that. You guys would be taking home the trophy for sure. Well, my voice leaving, I think, means it's the end of the show. Thank you so much for joining me today. This has been WYCD Wicked. That stands for What You Can Do. My name's Jake.